Go ahead, Lou.
Well, hi, folks. Hi, my name is Lou Abella. I'm here on behalf of the Eagle Group to talk to you today about applying to the state of Minnesota and share some of the tips that veterans need to know as they're doing so. So, one of the first things we want to do when we're talking about applying to the state of Minnesota is understanding where to go to apply at. The state of Minnesota careers website is available out there, https://mn.gov/careers. Now, that is going to actually take you to the actual URL, which has MMB in the middle of it, as you can see here on the slide. Just note that that is the actual site. So if you see that MMB, you're still there. The things you're going to do when you get to that site is on the first page, you're going to want to click the Search Open Positions button, which you'll see like on the screen here. It's right in the middle of the screen. And then when you get to the following screen, there's a lot of things you can do here, but I suggest that you simply click the arrow that you can see highlighted in yellow. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly pop up the actual website and take you to that real quick. So when you go to that mn.gov/careers, this is the website you get to. You can see right here in the middle, it says search open positions. You want to click on that. And then you're going to go here. This is the arrow I'm talking about at the top. You want to click that. And then you will come to the main search screen. This search screen is going to list all the jobs available at the state at this time. And so you'll get here, you'll also see at the top, there is the search jobs again. As part of this, I'm going to take you through one of the actual job descriptions, and I am going to pull it up here by searching for the job ID. It is this one here. It's an IT senior business analyst, and this is with Minnesota IT Services. It's also referred to as Minute, MNIT. So I just click on that one. And then this is what a job description here on the website is going to look like. Now, I'm going to get back to the slide here in a minute. I just want to go through this, just show you real quick. This is what a job description looks like. And all of this is extremely good information to know. So let me just click back to the slide deck. And we'll move on to the next slide. So as we're talking about what I just showed you, that job description, the first thing I'm always going to say is save the entire job description. Whatever job that you are applying to, make sure you save everything in that job description. The reason is there's a bunch of information in there, and it is always good to have that because you'll find the process takes a while to get through for the state, and having this information referred back to is always very helpful. You'll see on there, there's different sections. There's job details, job summary. Things we'll have to pay close attention to, like the qualifications. And there's other information in there about application details, about how to apply, and other benefits that veterans have as part of this, as a part of applying to the state. And then we can take a look at benefits real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by moving into the job details. Now, the job details, as you can see here on the right-hand side of the screen, this actually comes from the job description. It has a lot of information in it. At the very top was the job ID, which you saw that I could use that to actually go directly to this job ID. There's a lot of information in this section here where you see all the bullet points. Some of the things you should really look at has to do with the telework eligible at the state of Minnesota. There has been a mandate that came down from the governor that people can telework up to 50% of the time in most state jobs. There are a couple of other classifications, But what you're going to want to do is whenever you're looking at this to find out if you have the possibility of working from home, you're going to need to read into the job description and find out what exactly that telework eligible means. The word remote worker at the state has a very different connotation when we're talking about working from home. If you get further into the uh, hiring of a state job, we can talk further about that at another time. Another thing to really take a look at is who may apply. As you can see in this job posting, this is open to all qualified job seekers. Not every position out there is available to everybody. It depends upon what's happening at the state, and some positions have certain requirements uh, prior to uh, uh, applying for that job. So just make sure that you are part of that who may apply. The next thing on here is the closing date. The closing date is very important because this is the day that you have to get an application for this position in by. This is the final date. This is also the date after which HR will start to kick off their processes. So it's kind of, you got to wait for this. As you can see here, there's roughly a week to 2 weeks in this position here between the opening or the date posted and the closing date. Next thing to take a look at here is the salary range. Every state job will have the salary range in there. And as you can see on this one, it is actually indicated by both the hourly and the annual salary. These salary ranges are very much like military pay grades. They are done in steps. So when we're talking about these ranges, it's not, you can go up by $5 on this. No, there are very specific steps. In fact, most of the salary ranges contain about 16 steps. So when you go to get a job, you will start at one of the steps and will typically progress from there. So that's something to know. The next thing on here is to understand that 92% of the jobs at the state are governed by some sort of bargaining unit or union. On here, you can see that this is administered by Union 214, which is the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees. It's called MAPE. And the reason to understand this, why it's important, is because that means that all of these jobs actually are controlled by contracts that these unions have with the state. And that means that when you start talking about things like benefits, they may vary slightly based upon what is written into the actual contract. One of the other things to take a look at now is the FLSA status, or the Fair Labor Standards Act. In this case, there typically are two classifications. One is exempt and one is non-exempt. When we talk about exempt, those are typically individuals who are paid on a salaried basis. And when we talk about non-exempt, those are typically people who are paid on an hourly basis, hence showing that in the salary ranges. You can look up the Fair Labor Standards Act as to what sort of information it provides as far as rights for individuals. But just know that jobs are classified based upon the Fair Labor Standards Act, and that does have some significant issues when it comes to the contracts. The last thing on here is the Connect 700 eligibility. Connect 700 is a program that if you have a disability, you can apply to the program. This then gives a person, essentially, if they are hired under this program, 700 hours to be able to prove that they can fulfill that position. Now I'm going to move on to the next part of the job description, and this is the qualifications. The qualifications, there's a couple of parts. There's the minimum and there's preferred. Now, the most important thing about the minimum requirements when you are applying to the state is that you demonstrate on your resume clearly that you meet all minimum requirements. It's not good enough to have some and not others. You must show that you meet all of them. Now, the thing about the state is the state does not use any sort of applicant tracking system. There is a resume repository where you have to submit your resume to, but they don't use an applicant tracking system or ATS. What does happen is every time you put a resume in, that resume after the closing date will be reviewed by someone in HR. Now, that person reviewing it may not be a subject matter expert for the field that you are looking for. So it's very important that when you put your resume together, you stay away from jargon and other terms that might be considered normal within your industry. Because the person who is looking at this to evaluate if you meet those minimum qualifications is looking at that job description, looking at those minimum requirements, and seeing if they can match those minimum requirements to what's on your resume. So all I can say there is make sure you make it obvious. Make sure that, hey, if it makes sense to use the words that are on the job description, put it in your resume to make it extremely obvious that you have those qualifications. One of the other things about the state is that as of, I can't remember exactly how long, but it's been within the past year, the governor actually passed a law that degrees are no longer required for positions. Well, I should say for most positions, a degree is not required. Degrees can substitute for some period of experience. So make sure when you look at the minimum qualifications, you check and see what those say as to if a degree will take up any experience. The other thing on there are preferred qualifications. Preferred qualifications are the things you want to put on your resume that make you stand out as the best candidate. You will see they will have things on there that will say these are the preferred qualifications. These are the kinds of things that you can use jargon for so that when it comes to be reviewed and the resumes are ranked, these are the sorts of things where someone who is a subject matter expert will take a look at and will say, oh, okay, this person understands this industry. They're using that type of jargon. So just remember, under preferred, this is where you really want to show how well you go above those minimum qualifications. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pop back to the job description. So we're going to take a look. As I was talking about it here, you'll see at the top, you have the job details. As we move further down, you have the job summary, something to take a look at, something to read through to say, what exactly does this job do? And as I talked about qualifications, you'll see here on the screen now, the minimum qualifications, and they are spelled out in like this. The position requires a minimum of 5 years of experience. You'll also notice at the very bottom, it does say a master's degree in information technology or related fields substitutes for 3 years, bachelor's degree for 2, associate's degree for 1. So it's up to you when you're doing minimum qualifications is to make sure that it's obvious that you meet these 5 years of experience, plus all of these bullet points that are in there. You can see the preferred qualifications, and those will be a little more specific than the minimum qualifications. This is where, once again, on your resume, you should have those down. And then there's also this section that's called additional requirements. Most of the additional requirements have to do with background checks that you will be put through in this position. So just note that there are things on here, especially things like the education verification and the drug screen. Whatever you put on your resume, make sure that you can back that up so that when they go to check these things, and the state will, that it all passes with no issues. Now, the next part I'm going to talk about is this section down here, application details. And there's a bunch of information down here. I'm going to go back to the slides in a second, but I just want you to know that if you get onto this page, There are some links that you can click on, specifically this one here about veteran status, recently separated veterans, and certain disabled veterans. Those will take you to actual definitions of that specific term. So under the how to apply, as I said before, you must submit a resume to the Minnesota system. In that job description, there is an apply button. You make sure you click on that and go through the steps to actually put a resume in the system. Some of the most important things under this section are under contact. Under that section, there will be a point of contact for all questions. It is typically an individual email address. All I can say about that is make sure that you take note of that, you keep that contact name, and that you use it. Because this is the person who's there to help you get your resume submitted and take care of everything. On that how to apply, there will be directions in there for Connect 700, the program I discussed previously. Just remember, you must apply to the Connect 700 program prior to you actually applying to the job. This is a different kind of program. It requires you to be accepted to the program. And once you have that accepted status, you can then apply under this program. Now, the thing about this is that allows the hiring manager to hire you in a non-competitive way. In other words, if you apply under the Connect 700, the hiring manager can decide, I'm just going to go hire you. I don't have to go through a competitive process. Now, next thing, and this is really important for veterans, is that there are two different types of veterans or veteran status that you can apply for. The first one is called CDV, or Certain Disabled Veterans. These are veterans who have a 30% or more service-connected disability. With this, the hiring manager can, as they're moving into a competitive process, the hiring manager can decide to appoint a person to that position and not go through with the competitive hiring process. This means if you have a 30% or more disability rated by the VA, there is the possibility of the hiring manager just offering you the job. The other category for veterans are what are called recently separated veterans. Now, as I said on the job description page, there is a link to what a recently separated veteran is. You should go out there and check and make sure that you meet that criteria. The thing about recently separated veterans is that when we talk about a competitive hiring process, the hiring manager can go out and they can say, I want to look at this many resumes. If they choose the top 5 out of every resume that was put in, they might choose the top 5. However, by state law, if there are recently separated veterans who apply into this job, the top 5 RSV candidates must also be added to the interview pool. That means that the top 5 RSV candidates will be assured that they will get an interview. Now, if there's 10 RSV candidates, the hiring manager will have to make a determination as to which are the top 5, but it greatly increases your chances of getting an interview by putting in that you are a recently separated veteran. Now, for both of these designations, you're going to have to submit additional information. This is where having the point of contact is essential. Typically, there are instructions on the job description that says what you need to do to submit this, and it is an additional process outside of just submitting your resume. So you need to make sure that you read what needs to happen and follow those instructions. Now, I am going to say that these sorts of things for veterans in Connect 700, for the most part, these are mandated by state law, and they go across all job positions. If for some reason you do not see the information about certain disabled veterans or recently separated veterans on the job description, reach out to the contact that was provided on that job description and ask them how you can apply as either one of those types of veterans. Like I said, this is something that's mandated by state law. Just because it's not on that job description doesn't mean that you're not entitled to it. Now, from there, I'm going to move to the next section, which are benefits. One of the things we all like about jobs is the benefits it brings. There are a lot of benefits at the state. Many may vary by the different contract and agency that that position is for. As I stated before, all the jobs are, or 92% of the jobs are controlled by the contracts, and the benefits may vary slightly depending upon what you're doing in that agency. But there is a lot of the same kinds of things: paid vacation and sick leave. It's actually called sick and safe leave. There's 12 paid holidays a year. We have medical, dental, vision. The one interesting thing is that there is a pension plan at the state. It is a 3-year vesting plan, which means you have to work for the state for 3 years. It's non-cumulative time, but you need to be there for 3 years before you will be vested in this, which means when you retire, you will be given a pension from the state of Minnesota. Now, as a veteran, there is actually an ability on most of the contracts to buy back up to 5 years of your military time, which means that regardless of how much time you spend in the military, if you spent 5 or more years, you can apply to buy back that time, which would then add to how many years you will have going towards your pension. Now, I'm going to tell you this: it's not a cheap thing. And the sooner you do it, the less money you have to put into it in the buyback. And because it's all based upon actuarial time, you have to submit a $250 deposit, which, if you choose to move forward, will be applied towards your buyback. However, if you choose not to move forward, that money is non-refundable. So something to look into. It is a longer term investment, and it's available to veterans to buy up to those 5 years of time. There's also short and long-term disability insurance, as well as an employee assistance program for work and life support. All meant to make working at the state that much easier. So I'm going to go back here real quick to the website. As I said, under how to apply, you'll see here is the contact information on this position with the person's name right there. The Connect 700 program information, as I was talking about for veterans. There is a section here on current state employees. If you are a current state employee, there are other things that you can do if you want to apply for this job. It's all spelled out here. As you go further down, you'll see the benefits section I'm talking about that has to do specifically with this position. Once again, based upon your contract and the agency that you're working for. Once we get to that point, we have covered a lot of what goes into the job description. So what I want to talk about now is the hiring process. When we're talking about these jobs at the state, you need to know that hiring at the state typically takes longer. On average, it's over 70 days between the time that they post these positions and the time they actually do a hire. As I said, there's a lot that goes into this, and there's a lot of manual work. This is why it takes longer. This is why I started out by saying, make sure you save the job description, because you might be, 60 days down the road and have a question and want to reach out to that contact. Well, continue to reach out to that contact even that long down the road. What will happen is sometime after the closing date, the HR will start to review resumes. Once they make a determination whether you meet the minimum qualifications or not, they will send a notification out to you, typically by email. Now, one thing you have to remember is that if you do not meet the minimum qualifications, you have the right to go back and ask why. And they will they will send back to you and tell you what minimum qualifications you did not meet. Once that occurs, you have up to 30 days to provide an updated resume showing that you actually meet those qualifications. Once again, this goes back to making sure that the minimum qualifications are spelled out as plainly and as obviously as it is made in the actual job description. Even if you have to use some of the same terminology that's in that job description, make it obvious. You also, if you're going to respond with an updated resume, you want to make sure you respond quickly as the hiring process does continue to move forward. And if you take too long to respond, they may move forward with candidate selection and interviews before you get that resume back to them. One of the other things you should know is that if you do get to the point of being in a competitive hiring situation, that means they call you up, say they want to schedule an interview, you're going in, you're interviewing with people. The interviews that you go to are going to be scored. If you get through the interview process and they come back and they say, well, we're sorry, but we did not select you, you can ask for the comments on your interview. In other words, how were you scored? It is something that they need to provide back to you. There is a wealth of information in that response because they do talk about what are the questions. They do talk about how were the questions scored. And then they do talk about what comments that the individual interviewers had about you. So just remember that's something that you can do. You can go right back to the contact and say, can you provide those things to me? While you might not have gotten that position, it's great information for the next position that you would be applying to at the state. And so with all that, I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention. And Alan, we can go ahead and stop the